Part 1. The Spark of Temptation. I never thought of myself as the kind of man who would cheat. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have laughed at the suggestion. I loved my wife, Emily. She was everything I had ever wanted. Beautiful, smart, compassionate. We built a life together, a comfortable home in the suburbs, weekend barbecues with friends, and talks about having kids soon. But sometimes, life has a way of taking you down roads you swore you'd never walk. It started on an ordinary Thursday night. I had worked late at the firm, drowning in paperwork and the endless demands of clients who thought their problems were the center of the universe. By the time I left, my body was aching for something. Maybe food, maybe just a distraction from the monotony. I stopped by a little diner not far from my office, one of those places that still had the checkered floors and faded booths that had seen better days. And that's where I saw her. Her name was Alyssa. She was young, mid-20s at most, with dark hair tied up in a loose ponytail and piercing green eyes that seemed to see right through me. She wore the standard waitress uniform, a simple black top and a name tag pinned to the left side of her chest, but somehow she made it look effortless. She had a way of moving, fluid and confident, like she owned the room without trying. "Long day?" she asked as she poured my coffee, her voice smooth and teasing. "You have no idea." I chuckled, rubbing my temples. "What's good here?" "Depends on what you're in the mood for," she said with a smirk, resting her hands on the counter. I don't know what it was about that moment, but something shifted. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, not as some tired businessman but as a man. I had forgotten what that felt like. Emily and I had settled into routine, comfortable, predictable. But Alyssa? She was exciting, unfamiliar, dangerous in a way I couldn't define. I ordered a burger and fries, trying to shake the thoughts forming in my head. But as the night wore on, I found myself lingering, making small talk, watching the way she bit her lip when she laughed. It had been a long time since a woman had looked at me like that, and I liked it. When I left, she slipped me a napkin with her number on it. My heart pounded as I took it, my fingers tracing over the ink as if touching it would burn me. "In case you ever need a break from those long days," she said with a wink before turning to take another order. I hesitated, staring at the numbers, then tucked the napkin into my pocket. I told myself it was harmless, just a conversation, a bit of fun, but deep down, I knew better. And so it began. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Alyssa. Her voice, the way she smiled at me, how easy it was to talk to her. I lay in bed next to Emily, staring at the ceiling, feeling guilt creep into my chest. My wife stirred beside me, murmuring something in her sleep, and I turned to look at her. She was still the same woman I had married, but something felt different now. Or maybe it was me who had changed. The napkin burned a hole in my pocket the next morning. I hesitated before pulling it out, running my thumb over the ink. Should I text her? What would I even say? I wasn't an idiot. I knew what giving her my number would mean. A line crossed. A door opened that couldn't be shut. Instead, I folded the napkin and shoved it into my wallet. Maybe I just liked knowing it was there. A secret. A temptation. Work dragged on that day. I checked my phone more times than I cared to admit, half expecting a message from a number I hadn't given out. By lunchtime, I was restless, my thoughts drifting back to the diner. To her. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But by the time the clock hit 6, I found my car pulling into the parking lot again, as if it had a mind of its own. Alyssa noticed me the moment I walked in. She smiled, slow and knowing, as she made her way over. "Back so soon?" she teased, setting a menu in front of me. I smirked, pretending like it wasn't a big deal. Figured I'd give the food another shot. "Uh-huh," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Or maybe you just like the company." I didn't have an answer for that, so I just let the moment hang between us, thick with something unspoken. I should have walked away. I should have gone home to my wife. Instead, I stayed. Over the next week, I found myself making excuses to stop by the diner. At first, I tried to tell myself it was the food, but I wasn't fooling anyone, not even me. It was Alyssa. It was the way she leaned against the counter when she talked to me, the way she laughed at my bad jokes, the way her fingers brushed against mine when she handed me the check. Every encounter added fuel to the fire. She started texting me, short, flirty messages that made my stomach tighten. At first, I kept my responses casual, but soon I was checking my phone every hour, waiting for the next message. I told myself it was innocent, that it wasn't going anywhere. But then came the night I crossed the line. It was a Friday, and Emily had gone to visit her sister for the weekend. I had the house to myself, a fact that I didn't even try to pretend wasn't convenient. Alyssa texted me as I was finishing dinner. "You should come by. I get off at 10. We can grab a drink." I hesitated. I typed out a response, deleted it, retyped it. I told myself to say no, but I didn't. At 9:55, I was parked outside the diner, my heart hammering as I watched her walk out. She saw me, grinned, and slid into the passenger seat. "Took you long enough," she teased. "I wasn't sure I should come," I admitted. She tilted her head, studying me. "But you did." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I did." And with that, I knew there was no turning back. Part 2. A dangerous game. I told myself that nothing had changed, that my life was still the same, that I was still the same man I had always been. But the truth was, something had shifted the moment Alyssa slipped her number into my hand. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself I wouldn't use it, that it was just an ego boost, nothing more. But the temptation gnawed at me, whispering in the back of my mind during the quiet moments of my day. Then one evening, when Emily had already gone to bed and I was left alone with my thoughts, I reached for my phone. My fingers hesitated over the screen before finally typing out a simple message. "Hey." I stared at the word for a long time before pressing send. It was just one message. Harmless, right? Alyssa responded almost immediately. "Took you long enough." My heart pounded. I had stepped onto a path I swore I'd never take, and with each passing second, it felt harder to turn back. It started with messages. A few texts here and there. Flirty, teasing, always walking the line between playful and dangerous. Then came the late-night conversations, her voice smooth and inviting over the phone. She asked questions that made me think, that made me feel like I was more than just a husband stuck in routine. She made me feel seen. "Tell me something," she said one night. "Do you ever wonder what life would be like if you had made different choices?" I hesitated. "Sometimes. But I have a good life. A great wife." "That's not what I asked." A beat of silence passed between us. Then I sighed, rubbing my temple. "Yeah, I wonder." She hummed in approval. "I think everyone does. It's human nature." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just being human. The first time we met outside of the diner, it was under the guise of innocence. Just coffee, I told myself as I walked into the small cafe, scanning the crowd until I spotted her. She was already waiting, stirring her drink with a slow, deliberate motion. "I was starting to think you'd stand me up," she teased as I slid into the seat across from her. "I almost did. But you didn't." She smirked, leaning in slightly. "Why do you think that is?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, but I wasn't ready to say it out loud. One coffee turned into a walk. A walk turned into dinner. And then, before I knew it, I was meeting her at her apartment. I told myself it was still harmless, that I was in control, that I could stop whenever I wanted. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't in control at all. That night, as I lay in bed next to Emily, I realized how easy it had been to slip into this life. To justify my actions. To tell myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong. But I was. And I had no idea how to stop. Days turned into weeks. What started as casual meetings became something else entirely. I found myself looking forward to Alyssa's texts more than I cared to admit. At home, I was distracted. Emily noticed but didn't say anything, at least not yet. Alyssa made things easy. She didn't ask questions about my marriage, didn't pressure me for promises I couldn't make. She just wanted me in the moment, and I let myself fall deeper into her world. One night, as I got ready to leave her apartment, she caught my wrist. "Stay," she whispered. I shook my head. "I can't." "Won't," she corrected, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "But one day you will." I didn't answer. I couldn't, because part of me knew she was right. Lying to Emily became second nature. I had perfected the art of deception, of slipping through the cracks of my own life undetected. But every now and then, guilt would creep in. A moment of hesitation before kissing my wife goodnight. A flash of regret when I saw the love in her eyes. But regret wasn't enough to stop me. And neither was she. I started taking longer drives after work, claiming I needed to clear my head. In reality, I was spending stolen hours in Alyssa's arms. She became my escape, my addiction. I told myself it wasn't love, just something I needed to feel alive again. But the deeper I fell, the harder it became to climb back out. One evening, Alyssa asked, "Do you ever think about telling her?" I froze. Telling her what? She traced circles on my arm. That you don't love her anymore. That you love me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I never said I loved you. She smirked. Not yet. I wanted to deny it. To tell her this was temporary, that it was all going to end soon. But I couldn't say it. Because part of me wasn't sure it was true. Part 3. The cracks begin to show. I told myself I had control. That I could keep the two halves of my life separate. That what I had with Alyssa was nothing more than an escape. Something fleeting. Something that would fade before it ever caused real damage. I was wrong. The first real mistake came on a Wednesday evening. Emily and I were having dinner. A quiet night at home. Something we hadn't done in a while. She was telling me about her day, laughing about something her coworker had done, when my phone vibrated. I shouldn't have checked it, but I did. Alyssa's name flashed on the screen, along with a message that made my stomach drop. Miss you already. Can't wait for Friday. Emily noticed the way my face tensed, the way my fingers hesitated before flipping my phone over. Who was that? She asked, her voice light but laced with suspicion. Just work, I lied, forcing a casual shrug. She didn't press the issue, but I saw the doubt flicker in her eyes. A small fracture, barely noticeable, but there nonetheless. And once a crack forms, it only spreads. Alyssa was becoming more reckless. She started calling at odd hours, leaving voicemails that made my blood turn cold. I had told her we needed to be careful, that we couldn't afford any mistakes, but she had started pushing back. You act like I don't exist outside of those stolen hours, she said one night, arms crossed as she leaned against the kitchen counter in her apartment. Like I'm just some secret you get to keep? I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Alyssa, you knew what this was. She stared at me, green eyes blazing. Did I? Or did I just believe what I wanted to? I had no answer to that. And maybe that was an answer in itself. Emily's suspicion grew in quiet ways. She started watching me more closely, asking about my schedule with a little more edge in her voice. She wasn't accusing me outright. Not yet. But I could feel it coming. One night, I came home late, the scent of Alyssa's perfume still clinging to my clothes. I thought I had masked it well enough, but as I stepped into the bedroom, Emily turned to me, her expression unreadable. Where were you? She asked. Work ran late, I said automatically. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, softly, you smell different. My breath hitched. It's just, someone at work was wearing strong perfume. It must have stuck. A lie. A pathetic one. She didn't respond, just nodded slowly and turned off the lamp. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, knowing I was running out of time. Alyssa wasn't satisfied being in the shadows anymore. She started leaving hints, little breadcrumbs that only I could see. A lipstick mark on my collar that I almost missed. A note slipped into my pocket, thinking of you, that I only found when I reached for my wallet in front of Emily. And then, the worst mistake yet. She came to my office. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed. I checked it instinctively and froze. Alyssa, I'm in the lobby. Panic surged through me. I excused myself, walking briskly to the elevator, my heart hammering. When the doors opened, there she was. Radiant, confident, completely unconcerned about the storm she was about to unleash. What are you doing here? I hissed, glancing around to make sure no one I knew was nearby. She smirked. Relax. I just wanted to see you. You can't be here, I said, lowering my voice. This isn't part of the deal. She rolled her eyes. Maybe I'm tired of the deal. Maybe I want more. I gritted my teeth. Alyssa, you should get back to your meeting, Mr. Married Man, she said, stepping closer, trailing a finger along the edge of my tie. Don't want your wife getting suspicious, do we? And just like that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, pulse racing, knowing I had lost control. That night, Emily asked me again, "Are you having an affair?" I should have denied it immediately. I should have scoffed, laughed, done something to throw her off the scent. But I hesitated, just for a second, and that was all she needed. Her face crumbled, and she nodded, as if she had already known, as if she had just been waiting for confirmation. "I see," she whispered, turning away. "Emily," I started, but she held up a hand. "Don't." The room felt impossibly small. My chest tightened as I watched her walk to the closet, pull out a suitcase, and start packing. "Where are you going?" My voice cracked, desperate. She didn't look at me. Somewhere I don't have to be lied to. I reached for her, but she pulled away, her shoulders trembling. "Please," I whispered. "Don't do this." She turned then, and I saw the tears in her eyes. "You already did." And just like that, the life I had built, the one I thought I could keep, began to fall apart. Part 4. The Fallout. The house was eerily silent after Emily left. It wasn't just the absence of her voice or the rhythmic hum of her nightly routines. It was something deeper, a void stretching through every room, a stark contrast to the life we had built together. Or, more accurately, the life I had destroyed. Days passed, then a week. I told myself she needed time, that she would come back once she had cooled off. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't an argument we could smooth over. This was the breaking of something fundamental, something that couldn't be repaired with apologies. Alyssa, of course, was still there. Her texts became more insistent, her calls more frequent. She wanted to know what came next, now that my marriage was unraveling. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" she asked one night as we lay in her bed. Her fingers traced idle patterns on my chest, her green eyes watching me closely. I exhaled, staring at the ceiling. "I don't know what I wanted." She frowned, propping herself up on one elbow. "You can't have it both ways. She's gone. That means we can actually be something now." I turned my head to look at her, and for the first time, I saw the truth of the situation. The fantasy I had built around Alyssa, the excitement, the forbidden allure, was crumbling in real time. Without the secrecy, without the danger, what were we? What was she to me? She must have seen the shift in my expression because she sat up fully, pulling the sheets around her. "Oh my God, you're having regrets?" "It's not that simple," I murmured. "It is." Her voice sharpened. "You made a choice, and now you have to live with it." But that was the problem. I hadn't made a choice. I had let things spiral, convincing myself I had control even as everything slipped through my fingers. Emily didn't block my number, but she didn't answer my calls either. Every attempt at contact was met with silence. I wanted to give her space, but the uncertainty was suffocating. Then, 2 weeks after she left, she sent a message. "I need to meet with you. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Our place. Our place." The house we had shared, now a monument to my failures. I barely slept that night, imagining every possible outcome of our conversation. Would she give me another chance? Had she only needed time to process everything? Or was this the end for good? The next evening, I arrived early. The house felt foreign, as if I were trespassing in my own life. When Emily walked in, she looked different, more composed, but distant, as if she had already made peace with something I hadn't. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, setting her bag down. "Of course," I replied, standing awkwardly by the kitchen counter. "Emily, She held up a hand. "Don't. I'm not here to rehash what happened. I just wanted to talk about what comes next." I swallowed hard. "And what has come next?" She sighed, folding her arms. "I'm filing for divorce." Even though I had expected it, hearing the words out loud knocked the air from my lungs. "Emily, please." "Don't beg," she said sharply. "You don't get to beg now." I clenched my jaw, nodding stiffly. "I understand. I'll be staying at my sister's for now, but I'll need to come back to get the rest of my things. We can figure out a timeline for that." Her voice was clinical, detached. The woman who once shared my bed, my dreams, my life, was talking to me like I was a stranger. I wanted to tell her I still loved her, that I had made a mistake, that she was the best thing that had ever happened to me. But I had already lost the right to say those things. Instead, I nodded. Okay. She exhaled, then finally looked at me. I hope it was worth it. Then she turned and walked out. Alyssa was waiting for me when I got back to her apartment. She could tell something was wrong the moment I stepped inside. What happened? She asked, watching me closely. It's over, I said, collapsing onto the couch. She frowned. What's over? Everything. I raked a hand through my hair. Emily's filing for divorce. It's done. For a moment, Alyssa didn't say anything. Then, cautiously, isn't that what we wanted? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is it? Her expression hardened. You're seriously going to sit there and mope? You had your chance with her. You chose me. I met her gaze and suddenly, I felt nothing. No passion. No excitement. Just exhaustion. I don't think I ever chose anything, I admitted. Alyssa crossed her arms. So what? You regret everything? Is that what you're saying? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure what the answer was. She scoffed, shaking her head. You're pathetic. You ruined your marriage for me, and now you're acting like you're the victim. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was pathetic. Or maybe I was just finally seeing things clearly. I moved out of Alyssa's apartment a week later. She didn't fight me on it, just watched with thinly veiled contempt as I packed a suitcase and walked out the door. I spent the next few months in a haze. Work became my only distraction. I avoided social gatherings, ignored concern calls from friends. My life had become unrecognizable, and for the first time, I had to sit with the consequences of my choices. Then, one evening, I ran into Emily. It was in a grocery store, of all places. She was standing in the produce aisle, inspecting apples. She looked up and saw me, and for a brief second, there was something familiar in her expression. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. Hey, I said hesitantly. Hey, she replied. A beat of silence stretched between us. Then she offered a small, polite smile. The kind you give an old acquaintance, not someone you once loved. I hope you're doing well, she said. And that was it. She turned, placed the apples in her cart, and walked away. And for the first time, I truly understood what I had lost. Part 5. The Weight of Regret. The days after running into Emily felt heavier than anything I had experienced before. It wasn't just the loss of my marriage. It was the realization that I had burned my entire life to the ground for something that had never been real. I had spent so much time convincing myself that I was chasing happiness, that I deserved something thrilling, something different. But in the end, all I had left was silence. I stopped going to the places Alyssa and I had once met. I deleted her number, ignored her calls. She had stopped reaching out after a while, but I knew if I let myself slip, if I even responded once, I would fall back into the cycle. And I couldn't afford to lose any more of myself. Work became my refuge. I stayed late at the office, drowning myself in deadlines and paperwork, anything to keep my mind from drifting back to the past. But no matter how much I tried, Emily was always there, lingering like a ghost in every quiet moment. Months passed. The divorce was finalized without drama. No fights over property, no drawn-out battles in court. Emily had handled everything with the same quiet dignity she always carried. And when the final papers arrived, it felt as though she had truly vanished from my life. A friend of mine convinced me to go out for drinks one night. It was supposed to be a distraction, a chance to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. I sat at the bar, nursing a whiskey, nodding along to conversations I wasn't really listening to. And then I saw her. Not Emily. Alyssa. She was sitting a few seats down, laughing at something some guy had said. Her hair was styled differently, her dress a little more sophisticated. But the look she gave me when she noticed I was there, it was the same. For a brief second, I thought about going over to her, about trying to find some comfort in familiarity. But then I remembered the emptiness, the way everything had crumbled. So I paid my tab and left without a word. One night, I found myself parked outside Emily's new apartment. I didn't know what I had expected to find. Maybe a sign that she missed me too. Maybe a sliver of hope that she hadn't moved on. The lights were on. Through the window, I could see her moving through her kitchen, laughing at something on the phone. And then, a moment later, a man stepped into view. He leaned down, kissed her temple. She smiled, setting a plate in front of him. They looked comfortable, happy. I had spent so much time believing I could fix what I had broken, that if I tried hard enough, if I apologized the right way, Emily would find it in her heart to forgive me. But watching her now, I realized something I should have known all along. She wasn't waiting for me. She never had been. Emily had moved on, and I was still standing in the wreckage of my own making. I drove home that night and sat in my empty apartment, staring at the walls. The regret was suffocating, a weight I would carry for the rest of my life. I had thought I was searching for freedom, but all I had found was loneliness. I had thought I was escaping routine, but what I had lost was stability, love, and the one person who had ever truly seen me. I replayed everything in my mind, every wrong turn, every moment where I could have chosen differently. I told myself I would move on, that I would heal, but the truth was, some wounds never close. Some mistakes never fade. Late at night, when the silence was too loud, I wondered if Emily ever thought of me. If she ever looked back with even an ounce of regret. I would never know. And that, more than anything, was my punishment. No redemption. No second chances. Just the knowledge that I had lost her, and that I had done it to myself. Weeks turned into months. The loneliness remained, but I learned to exist with it. I threw myself into work, traveled more, tried to convince myself that a new routine would somehow fill the hole in my life. One evening, I ran into an old friend. He looked at me with something between sympathy and curiosity. "How have you been?" I forced a smile. "Keeping busy." "And Emily?" I hesitated, then shrugged. "She's good. She moved on." He nodded slowly, studying my face. "And you? Have you?" I didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. Some losses are permanent. Some regrets never fade. And some mistakes become the only story. The end.